one of the most often code customizations that is requested with IronSpeed Designer is, hey, listen, I've got I've got a stored procedure that is already there. I want to run that stored procedure. Either I want to accomplish something kind of in the background. Let's say, for example, I'm updating some things in batch, or I am actually want to effectively retrieve some data and display that, and that custom stored procedure is already available to me, and I don't want to essentially rewrite the same thing in IronSpeed Designer in terms of a new query or something like that. How do I accomplish that? Now, one of the key things with custom stored procedure is the following. We already create stored procedures for you if you're using SQL Server or Oracle, especially if you're using the Enterprise Edition and you choose that option. However, you may decide that, for example, that you may already have a different stored procedure. Currently, we do not allow you to customize the generated stored procedures at this point in time. We simply allow you to use what we create effectively. But you may choose to write your own stored procedure and call that and retrieve a value. And like I said, you could do either some stored procedures that are simply called or in order to accomplish some action, or calling a stored procedure that retrieves a set of records to display. Our current table control that you see is not geared towards supporting a data source other than the way that you accomplish with IronSpeed Designer. So you have a choice to make over here. If you want to call a stored procedure to display data, what you may want to do is use a standard .NET data grid or a grid view in order to do that. So that's what we're going to do in this example. We're going to use a grid view in order to essentially load the data from the database, calling a stored procedure and displaying it to the user. So in this particular example, all we're going to do is we're going to display a drop-down, and the drop-down is going to essentially display a list of countries. And then when a user selects a specific country, in this particular screenshot that you see, the user selected Canada, and then what we are doing is we're displaying the list of customers that are in Canada. So that's the goal of this code customization. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how to accomplish this thing. I'm going to copy and paste a whole lot of code from a cheat sheet document that I've got, and then what I'm going to do is walk you through exactly what I'm trying to do here. So this is the goal. Let's talk about our strategy on how we want to customize here. Of course, the first thing that you need to do is define a stored procedure. The stored procedure needs to take country as a parameter and returns a data set, basically. That's our first goal over here. The second goal, or the second part of our strategy here in order to make this customization, is that we need to create a page to display the results. And we're going to make the layout customizations necessary to display a country drop-down. And then we're going to put a standard .NET ASP grid view in order to display the results from the stored procedure. So this code customization will also help you understand how you can use any .NET control in an IronSpeed Designer application. It also allows you to see how easy it is for you to customize your pages with, really any kind of .NET controls. You don't have to use IronSpeed Designer controls like field values and field, whatever buttons and so on. You can use any .NET controls over here. This code customization also shows you how you can effectively use some of the classes that we have created in order to make it much easier for you to retrieve data by calling a stored procedure here. You don't have to worry about connection objects and this and that and so on. Finally, the third part of our customization will take us to the code customization. What we need to do is do the following things. We need to customize the drop-down list that we have created, called the country drop-down, and we're going to add 3 different functions for that. One is called the init function in order to essentially initialize it, the drop-down. And in the init, all we're going to do is basically set up the drop-down initially. We'll also set up the load so that we can populate that drop-down with the list of countries from the customer database. And then we're going to populate the selected index. We're going to call the selected index change so that whenever your user changes a particular country in that drop-down, then we are going to load the data grid basically. Now, in the case of load, what we're going to use are the standard .NET, standard data access layer classes that are created by IronSpeed Designer here. So we're not going to use a stored procedure to populate the country drop-down. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the grid view, and we're going to do two things there. We're going to essentially implement a load method, which is simply going to call the stored procedure and then attach the data source of that grid view to the results returned by the stored procedure. And then we're going to handle a page index changing so that when the user presses the next or the previous button, then a new set of data is then loaded for me. Okay, so let's talk about the stored procedure. I'm not going to go into details of how exactly stored procedures work, but you can figure that out pretty easily. Here is a very simple standard stored procedure. It's called MySP, and it takes p_country as a parameter. p_country is an NVAR car with 100 characters basically. And then what we do is basically say if the country passed in is blank, we're going to essentially return select star from customers. Or if the country is specified, then we're going to run a slightly different query. It's going to be select star from customers, where country equal to the country that is passed in as a parameter to this procedure. So that's all the custom stored procedure is. I've already gone in and in my SQL Server database, gone ahead and created MySP. So you can see that MySP, it's already resident over here. It's called MySP, and it's available to me. So that's my SQL Server Northwind database that is on my local machine over here. Okay, so what's the next step that I need to do? So that's the first part in our three-part strategy. The second part is to do the UI customizations that I need to do. In the case of the UI customization, what do I need to do in order to accomplish this thing? First and foremost, I need to create, let's say, start off with a blank page so that I can kind of show what exactly is going on. So let me actually go through this thing with IronSpeed Designer, and then you will have available to you a copy of this presentation so you can walk through that yourself. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into the customers folder. I'm going to right mouse click, select the new and new page. Now this is a new feature in 6.2, so let me dive down into a little bit more and explain to you what exactly I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do over here is, since I am in the customers folder, I'm trying to create a new page within that folder, and that particular page, it's not going to be an ASCX control, it's going to be a page, and then I'm going to base it on a particular master page that is available to you. This is a new feature of 6.2. Either I can base it on the default master page, in this case it's a horizontal menu master page, or I can select a blank master page. A blank master page simply means that there is really no content in that. There is a master page called blank, which is essentially an empty master page. That says, so my page refers to this blank master page, which really does not have anything inside of it. The other master pages have logos and have a positioning where the content needs to go, and may turn on or off AJAX or other things. For example, like in the case of email or print, AJAX is turned off so that you are not bloated with all of the JavaScript that is sent over to the user in an email attachment, basically, unlike maybe what you're displaying it on the screen. So I'm going to select a blank thing. It's going to display it's going to create something called mypage.aspx. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially over here switch over to the design mode. And I can rename it if I so choose by right mouse clicking and selecting rename. Now rename works only in design mode, does not work in live preview. Some people get confused that because when you're in live preview, you're actually viewing the application, so you are not supposed to be modifying the application at this point in time. So the rename is grayed out, and so is create a duplicate that is grayed out. But both of those are available to you, and in design mode, you can do a create or that. So right now, of course, when I switch over to live preview, the mypage.aspx is displayed. It's of course plain and blank. There's nothing over here. I'm going to switch over to design mode. I see a spreadsheet over here. How do I introduce a .NET control in this spreadsheet grid? Certainly on the right-hand side, I've got a whole bunch of toolbox. I can drag and drop headers and menus and different kinds of panels and third-party controls and buttons and footers and so on and so forth. But how do I introduce a .NET control? I can go to ASP and simply drag and drop an ASP drop-down list and into this cell, and it shows me, for example, it creates a drop-down list with an ID drop-down list, run at server, and then in fact even introduces certain list items as well. I'll go ahead and undo this thing and press Control Z over here so that I undo this thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to copy and paste it from a cheat sheet document that I've got over here. So I'm going to copy and paste just a very simple drop-down list over here. I'm going to go to the cell editor for the first cell and paste that. So it is equivalent to dragging and dropping that particular control, but here's what I did basically. ID equal country run at server. I click over into the next cell, and what I want to do basically is here in this particular set, introduce the grid view that we've got. So again, I'm going to go back to my cheat sheet over here, the Word document, and then come over to the cell editor and paste it over here. Keep in mind that a page, the spreadsheet grid is nothing but a table TR-TD tags if you're familiar with HTML. And so all I'm doing is I'm cutting and pasting some, essentially, some control, in this case the .NET control, into a particular TR-TD cell, basically, in this particular case, the second row over here. So in a way, modifying your page is so easy to do in 6.2 that if you know how to use a spreadsheet, you are able to now to customize the layout of your page very easily. And once you've got this, you can do all kinds of things like drag and drop and move it to a different cell, position it at different places, and so on and so forth. So it's very easy for you to accomplish that. When you look at the grid, you can also look at the cell editor for that and look at the exact contents that you had typed in, basically. So let's look at the ASP grid view and what we are trying to do over here. We've got an ID. It's called myGrid. We'll use that later in our code customization. Run at server means simply that, I want to make sure that I have access to this grid view in my code behind. If I do not specify that, then I cannot access page.mygrid as a control inside of my page. I want to also write a function which is going to be called whenever the user presses the next page or the previous page. And this is a standard ASP grid view attribute called onPage indexing. And I specify the name of a function, gridView underscore page index changing. We'll have to write this function, and we'll do that in a few minutes over here. Then I specify whether I'm going to allow paging and what my page index is to start out with. And then I go through and specify a whole bunch of styles, row style, selected row style, pager style, and header style. And these are just nothing but, to make the page look better. I don't need to do any of these things. If I don't do any of the row styles and selected styles, it's just going to display it in a standard bland way, basically. And then so it's really up to us, basically, in order to accomplish that. At this point in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build and run at this point, or actually I'm just going to build. And what this does is it produces all the code behind file that is necessary for me at this point in time. So now coming back to our presentation over here, let's go back and kind of take a stock of where we are. The first thing that we did was we defined a stored procedure, and we with text country as a parameter and returns a data set. You saw that, how we did that. I did not actually create it, but I showed you exactly one that was created. Second part of the strategy was to display the country drop-down in ASP grid view. I just showed you that, how you're able to kind of go to a cell editor and type in the ASP drop-down list and ASP grid view and accomplish that. Now the third part comes in. I need to define 5 or 6 different functions over here. I need to define the init, the selected index change, the load, the load on the grid view, page index changing, and of course the most important function that I want to show you, which is the stored procedure. So I'm going to skip through the first 5 of them very quickly over here, just explain to you very briefly, and then I'm going to spend most of my time in how to call that stored procedure over here. Let me switch back to RSP Designer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and select the code behind ASPX:.VB file over here and bring that up. When I bring up the VB file, the code behind file, I will notice that there is a section 1 and a section 2. This is kind of the standard way RSP Designer generated applications look like in terms of code behind. There's a section 1 and a section 2. These are regions basically, whether it is in C# or VB.NET. And these regions basically tell you that you can modify anything in section 1 and your code will never be overwritten in that. Do not modify in section 2 because section 2 is essentially overwritten whenever you press the build button effectively. So we recommend that you do everything in section 1 over here. There's already a load data and a save data and so on. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and create some space for me here in the middle of the file, and I'm going to start copying and pasting some functions so that you can see what exactly goes on. And I'll walk you through each one of them. The first 3 functions are going to be dealing with the drop-down list, basically. So let me copy those, and then I'll explain to you those 3 functions. Then the next 2 will be related to the grid view, and finally this calling the stored procedure. So what's the first one? The first one is that there is a handles country. Country, as you know, is my drop-down list, and I'm handling an event called a init event. And what I'm doing is all I'm doing is setting the auto postback equal to true. Now I could have actually done this another way, which is I could have gone to my ASPX page and actually could have done the following. Let me save this. I could have gone to the country over here and I could have just set auto postback equal to true. This was also possible for me to do that, and I'm just going to leave that as is over here. But let me switch back over here. So now in this particular case, I've done it in the init handler. So this is, again, standard .NET code. I'm not doing anything fancy here. If you know how to use .NET, Microsoft .NET Framework, this is what you would do. The next thing is that I'm going to handle the load event. As you know, .NET sends out the init event, the load event, and the pre-render event as a standard set of 3 events whenever a page is getting loaded, and it sends not just to the page but every control on the page. And we can choose to handle it if we decide to, or just simply ignore it. In this particular case, we want to handle it. And what I want to do in the country load is load the list of all countries from the customer's database. In this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the standard data access layer classes that are created for you by RSP Designer. RSP Designer, for every table, if you have a table called customers, it creates a customer's record class, which essentially is your object, effectively, that corresponds to a row in the database. And then I'm going to say, hey, listen, if it's already loaded, we don't need to load it. So this is just an efficiency, basically, because sometimes the load event may be called multiple times, in which case if the count is already greater than 0, I'm not going to bother loading it all over again. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an order by clause, and I'm going to say, this is RSP Designer Data Access Layer. I'm going to say the order by clause, add a country in ascending order, basically. So I'm going to sort everything by country in ascending order. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to read all of the records from the customer's table with a blank where clause. That means that I want everything, basically, but ordered by the order by clause over here. And then I'm going to create a new list item with the country value. And then if it's not already in the list, it not contains in the list, then I'm going to add it to the list. Now, again, there may be more efficient ways of doing it. There may be a separate country table that you could load it from, and you can do a variety of other things. But for the purpose of this example, I'm just going to load it kind of the long, inefficient way, which is essentially loading it from the customer's table by just calling get records effectively. Okay, now there are probably other ways like select distinct and things of that nature that you could do but I'm not going to worry about it for the time being. And then I'm going to finally add a last item called please select, and I'm going to insert it at the top. So after the end of this load function, all of my list of countries are going to be loaded. Finally, the last function that I need to write on the drop-down list is the selected index change. If the user selects a different value, because we have set the auto postback equal to true, the selected index change event has been defined by me here when I say handles country.selected index change. This function is going to be called, and all we're going to do is call load grid control. Okay, so those are three functions on the country dropdown. Now there are two functions that I need to define on the grid, and let's go ahead and copy that, and we'll walk through that thing. Okay, so now I'm going to write, and again these are standard .NET things. Load grid control, basically what it's going to do is I'm going to set allow paging to be true, and then here is the key line that I need to actually go through and do more things here, which is I'm going to set the data source property on the grid to be the results retrieved from the calling this custom stored procedure for grid view. So this is a function that I still need to write, and that's where I'm going to spend most of my time here. Then finally, I'm going to do a little bit housekeeping over here. I'm going to do essentially save the data set, save the contents of the data in a session variable. The reason I need to do that is because I may need to go back and repopulate the grid view if a postback occurs, basically. And then I'm going to do a variety of other things in terms of auto-generate the columns to be true so that the grid view automatically displays the column data and so on. Finally, call data bind and set the visible flag to true. When a new page is, when the user clicks a new next button, remember what we did was we defined this as the on-page index changing in the layout. And so what we do is we set the new page index here, and then we retrieve the data from the data set, and then we essentially tell it to essentially go to the next page by doing that. Now, this is probably not the most efficient way of doing it because I'm loading the entire data, entire set of customer records into memory, keeping it into the session, and then assigning it to the data source. But again, this is something where my stored procedure only took country as a parameter. It did not take a page number as a parameter. But I could have written this. This is actually one of the advantages of the iron speed table control. Iron speed table control will not load your entire database for you. It'll only load the specific page that is needed. So if you need to load page 37, it's only going to display retrieve the 10 records for page 37 rather than all million records that may be contained in your customer database and then extract only page 37 at display time, but all million records would be loaded into memory. So again, this is an inefficient way of doing it. Iron Speed Designer table control helps you make that very efficient. But again, for the purpose of this tutorial, the right thing that I want to focus on is how to call the custom stored procedure. So finally, after we've done all of the setup over here, I'm going to now copy the function called custom stored procedure, and let's focus in on this particular function here. So one of the things that Iron Speed Designer does is it has a set of base classes that are available to you. If you look on the App Explorer where my mouse is, you've got something called base classes that are over here. The base classes are a set of utility functions that we have created for you that are used in your application. You can choose to go directly to calling a stored procedure, or you can use some of the utility functions over here. I'm going to use a utility function over here. There is a class called baseclasses.data.storedProcedure that is used. This class basically allows you to specify the first parameter of this. When you create a new instance of this class, the first parameter is the connection string. In this case, it's called database northwind1. The place that you would get this thing is in your web.config file. In your web.config file, you will notice that there is a connection string called whose name is database northwind1, and there is a full connection string that is specified over here. So switching back to my VB file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify that connection string here, the name of the connection string, and my stored procedure class that is in base classes automatically then retrieves the connection for that, opens the connection, and then retrieves the data. I'm saying the second part of it is the name of the stored procedure that I am going to call, and the third parameter is the list of parameters that either I need to pass or I need to retrieve back. Now, in this particular case, this stored procedure is only passing the parameters, not retrieving back the values through parameters, but instead retrieving it back through the results returned by that function. So if you're familiar with something like C# or VB.NET, my output parameters are the return are not passed by reference values, but they're simply returned values here. So coming back, so this is really the key part which allows me to call a stored procedure. So I've just set up a call to the stored procedure. Now, the third parameter, parameter list, is what is now defined in step 1 and step 2, basically. So in step 1, what I do is I am going to create the first parameter. The first parameter's name is p_country. It's going to pass in the selected value from the dropdown that I have. I'm specifying that the parameter type is a varchar, and then finally the direction of this parameter is input. I could then go out and define multiple parameters, a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and so on. And some of those parameters, as I mentioned to you, could be passed by reference and effectively output parameters if I so choose to. Right now, I've only got one first parameter, so I define that parameter. Then I'm going to define an array list of these parameters, and all I'm going to do is just say this is, just one element in it, and that first element is first parameter, basically. Okay, so that's all I need to do, and then I have defined a new stored procedure. And finally, the last thing that I need to do is actually call that stored procedure, and that will essentially be done through a run query method. So notice what we have done. We essentially created a new stored procedure, passed in the connection string name, passed in the name of the stored procedure, passed in a parameter list. And before we created this new stored procedure call, we defined the parameter list, and then we simply called the run query method. I did not have to worry about opening up a connection to the database. I did not have to worry about closing a connection to the database. I did not have to worry about any of the other things that are necessary. The data access layer of your application created by IRSP Designer gave you a very high-level way to call this custom stored procedure. Once I've run the query, then I simply retrieve the data set that is a variable on my stored procedure that I created, and I simply return that data set, which will be then assigned to the data source variable of the grid view. Again, this is standard .NET. Data source variable is a standard .NET variable, which essentially takes a data set effectively. If I wanted to use a, if I was not returning a value, if I was just running some stored procedure in order to do some side effect things basically, then I would essentially call the run non-query for scalar results basically that are passed in or retrieved back as part of output variables, in which case now the data set will not be available because the non-query simply is not essentially a value that is returned back for that. So that's all there is to it in terms of calling a stored procedure. Create the stored procedure using a utility class called stored procedure, pass in the connection string, pass in the name of the function, pass in the parameter list, call the run query, and then essentially retrieve the value of the data set and return back. So now that we have implemented this, let's